When I lost my father, I thought grief would be the hardest thing to face. I thought the emptiness, the silence he left behind, would be the most painful part. But I had no idea what was waiting for me at home. The house was quiet when I got back from the funeral. I was still in black. My heels had been digging into my feet all day, but I hadn't even noticed until I took them off and stood in the middle of our living room. It was the first time I had really stopped moving in days. I could still smell the incense from the service clinging to my coat. Everything felt heavy. That's when I heard the front door open. Jack walked in, cheerful, with his mother right behind him. They were laughing, like they had just come back from lunch. I turned to face them, still numb, and managed to say, "Hey." Just that. Nothing more. Jack looked at me, smiled like he'd just gotten a bonus at work, and said, "Oh, by the way, I've decided to split the inheritance between me and Mom." I blinked. I didn't understand what he meant at first. I thought maybe I'd misheard. My father had passed away just days ago. His funeral had just ended. And this was what Jack wanted to talk about? He went on like it was nothing. "Don't be too greedy, Kelly. Finally, I can quit my job." His mother clapped, her hands together, almost giddy. She started talking about how they could finally go shopping. Maybe get a new car. "A proper one," she said. "Something that fits our lifestyle now." I just stood there. In that moment, I felt like the floor beneath me had quietly dropped away. It wasn't just the greed. It wasn't just the timing. It was the way they spoke about my father. The way they saw his death not as a loss, but as a windfall. I didn't say anything right away. I couldn't. I think I was afraid of what would come out if I did. So I did what I had gotten too good at doing. I smiled. I smiled like it didn't hurt. Like I hadn't just buried the man who raised me, protected me, loved me more than anyone else in the world. And I said, "Sure. Feel free to use the money however you and your mother see fit." I said it, and my heart shattered just a little more. Have you ever had a moment where someone revealed who they truly were, and you just stood there, stunned? If you have, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. Maybe we can help each other feel a little less alone. Back then, I was someone else. I was Kelly Cohan, an only child, raised by two deeply kind and brilliant parents, both of them doctors. My childhood was filled with warm dinners, late-night study sessions with my dad helping me with science homework, and my mom always reminding me to chase meaning, not just success. I was their world, and they were mine. I didn't follow in their exact footsteps, though. I chose pharmacy over medicine, a quieter path, more behind the scenes. They were a little disappointed at first, but they never said it out loud. They supported me anyway, just like they always had. After graduation, I landed a job at a major pharmaceutical company. It was stable, respectable. I had my own place, a good salary, and for a while, everything felt on track. Then everything changed. It was a regular morning when I got the call. My mom had been in an accident. By the time I reached the hospital, she was already gone. I don't really remember the weeks that followed. Just fragments. A lot of crying in my car, pretending to be okay at work, waking up in the middle of the night not remembering where I was. My dad and I, we clung to each other. Two people suddenly floating without the anchor we'd always leaned on. That's when Jack entered my life. We'd met once before, briefly, through a mutual friend. But this time, he stayed. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he showed up. He checked in, brought me meals, held my hand when I didn't have the strength to speak. He didn't push me to move on. He just sat with me in the grief. And when someone does that, when they hold your brokenness without flinching, it's easy to believe they're meant to stay forever. 2 years later, Jack proposed. I was still grieving in some ways, but I was also healing. Slowly. And it felt like love was part of that healing. My dad was so happy when I told him. He pulled Jack aside, thanked him for taking care of me, and said, "Please keep making her smile." Jack looked him in the eye and said, "I will." I believed him. Not long after, we visited Jack's family to share the news. That's when I met his mother for the first time. She looked me up and down, her makeup thick, her perfume overwhelming, and said, "Marriage. Huh? You're Jack's choice? Bit plain, aren't you? And older, too." I just stood there, stunned. I'd never been spoken to like that before. Jack stepped in quickly, not to defend me, but to explain. "Kelly works for M Pharmaceuticals. Her dad's a doctor, runs his own practice." His mother's eyes lit up. Suddenly her tone shifted. "Well now, that changes everything. Nice to meet you, Kelly." I should have seen it then. How Jack didn't praise who I was, but what I had. How his mother's approval came not from love, but from status. But I wanted things to work. I wanted the life we talked about. Quiet mornings, shared routines, a future built from the pain we'd both endured. I thought love could smooth over all the cracks. So I ignored the little voice inside me, the one whispering, "This doesn't feel right," and I said yes. Married life started quietly. I moved into the condo my dad had gifted me. It was beautiful. Tall windows, a view of the skyline, a kitchen I'd dreamed of cooking in someday with someone I loved. I remember unpacking that first night, folding Jack's clothes next to mine, thinking, this is it. This is where we build something real. And for a while, I held on to that hope with both hands. But pretty quickly, I realized Jack had never really lived on his own. Not in a meaningful way. He didn't know how to cook. He didn't know how to run a washing machine. He'd never cleaned a bathroom before. At first, I laughed it off. We were still in the honeymoon phase, and I didn't mind picking up the slack while we found our rhythm. But time passed, and nothing changed. When I brought it up, gently, at first, he brushed it off like I was being unreasonable. "You're better at it," he said. "It just makes sense for you to do it." He said it like it was logical. Like it was generous of him to let me handle everything. I was working full-time, coming home exhausted, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, making grocery lists, paying bills, remembering birthdays, keeping track of everything we needed. And he played video games, went out with friends, slept in on weekends while I scrubbed the floors. And then there was his mother. She never liked anything I did. Not the food I cooked. Not the way I decorated the apartment. Not even the gifts I gave her. 1 year for Mother's Day, I bought her a beautiful scarf from a department store. Simple, elegant, something I thought she'd like. She called me, annoyed. "Is this some off-brand thing? If you're going to give me a gift, at least make it a proper one. Chanel, Gucci, something people actually wear." I tried to explain the quality, how I'd picked it thoughtfully. But she didn't care. She just kept criticizing. I told Jack about it, hoping, just hoping. He'd say something like, "You did nothing wrong. I'll talk to her." But he just shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal. Just get her what she wants next time." That was his answer to everything. Just give her what she wants. Even when she started asking for money. At first, it was small things. "I need help with rent. I have some bills." Then it became constant. Jack never said no. He'd just smile, hand her cash, and say, "She's my mom. What am I supposed to do?" We weren't rich, not by a long shot. Jack's salary was decent, but not enough to keep up with her demands. I was saving, cutting corners, saying no to things I wanted, not big things, just little ones. A nice coat, a weekend away. I told myself it was for the sake of peace. But every time I handed over a bit more of myself to keep things calm, I felt a little smaller, and Jack never noticed. He never asked how I was doing. He never offered to help, never stepped in when his mother overstepped. I was managing everything, our home, our finances, our life, while they lived like guests in a house I was slowly falling out of love with. I used to love coming home, lighting a candle, putting on music, cooking a warm dinner. Now, it felt like a cage, a quiet, beautiful cage I had built with my own hands, and locked myself inside. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my phone rang. I was at work, catching up on emails. I almost didn't answer, thought I'd call back later. But something in me said, "Pick it up now." It was my father. His voice was soft, thinner than I remembered. He said he'd just come from the hospital. There was a long pause, and then he told me the truth. He had cancer. Terminal. The doctors said it was too far along for treatment. All they could do now was try to make him comfortable. Time stopped. I didn't even realize I was crying until I looked down and saw my hands shaking. I left work immediately and rushed to see him. And when I walked into that hospital room, he smiled at me with those same gentle eyes I'd looked up to my whole life. He patted the space beside him and said, "Come here, sweetheart." I sat down, still in disbelief, and he brushed my hair behind my ear, just like he did when I was little. "Kelly," he said softly, "this is fate. Let's accept it with peace." But I couldn't. I didn't want to. I wanted to scream, to fight it, to change it. But instead, I nodded, because he needed me to be strong. And I promised myself I would be. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, phone calls, managing medications, and trying to hold my life together with tape and hope. I told Jack about it, expecting, I don't know, comfort, support. All he said was, "That's tough. Please do your best." That was it. No offer to help. No questions about how I was coping. Just indifference. So I kept going. I went to work. I did the laundry. I took care of the bills. And I spent every spare moment at the hospital, watching my father's body grow weaker, while his spirit somehow stayed so strong. One afternoon, as I was feeding him soup, he barely had the strength to swallow. He looked up at me and asked quietly, "Are you happy, Kelly?" I froze. The truth was right there, sitting heavy in my chest. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and looked away. He reached out and took my hand. "You don't have to endure, sweetheart. Think about your happiness. Promise me that." I couldn't speak. I just cried. And he held my hand in silence, like he understood all the things I couldn't say. 3 months later, he passed away. He went quietly, peacefully. I was there. I held his hand until the very end. And when I walked out of that hospital for the last time, something inside me felt hollow. The world was quieter, dimmer. Back at home, I barely had time to grieve. I was thrown into planning the funeral, answering calls, organizing guests. Jack didn't offer to help, not once. He stayed in the background, scrolling on his phone, cracking jokes with his mother while I tried to hold everything together. The funeral was beautiful. So many people came to honor my father. Old friends, former patients, even some of his colleagues who had long since retired. They all had stories to share about how kind he was, how much he gave, how he changed their lives, and then it was over. The next day, I was sitting on the couch, surrounded by papers from the lawyer. Legal documents, tax notices, statements. It was overwhelming. I hadn't even processed what it all meant. I set them down and closed my eyes, just for a moment. That's when Jack and his mother walked in, cheerful as ever. I sat up, confused. "When did you get here?" Jack walked over with a huge grin, holding one of the folders I'd left out. "Well done, Kelly," he said. I stared at him. "What?" He waved the inheritance papers in the air like they were a prize he'd just won. "I've decided to split it between me and Mom." I didn't understand. I couldn't have. I blinked at him, still trying to catch up. And then he added, "Don't be too greedy, Kelly. Finally, I can quit my job." His mother was already listing all the things she wanted to buy. A new car, a luxury trip, shopping, of course. I sat there stunned. Not a single word about my dad. Not a moment of condolence. Not even a, "How are you holding up?" Just plans. Spending. Smiling like this was all just part of some reward they'd earned. And something in me shifted. I felt it. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something deeper. Heavier. Like a part of me had finally woken up after being asleep for too long. I looked at them, Jack and his mother, and I didn't feel shock anymore. I didn't even feel sad. I felt done. At that moment, I knew something inside me had changed. After that moment, something in me hardened. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't even argue. I just watched them. Like I was seeing, clearly for the first time. Like the fog I'd been living in had finally lifted, and everything about Jack, his entitlement, his mother's selfishness, the way they saw me as just background support, was right there in front of me. And they didn't stop. Within a week, Jack quit his job. He came home one evening, tossed his work bag onto the floor, grinned like a teenager who'd just pulled a prank, and said, "Guess what?" I handed in my notice. No more early mornings. We can finally live stress-free. I didn't know what to say. He kissed me on the cheek and walked off humming. Meanwhile, I was still paying the bills, still cooking every meal, still cleaning up after both him and his mother. Because yes, his mother had practically moved in. She claimed she was helping out, but all she did was leave her shoes in the hallway, her hair in the sink, and her opinions everywhere. She'd spent her afternoons browsing luxury websites on her tablet, while I scrubbed the kitchen floor. "Kelly, can you make me tea?" "Kelly, the laundry's still not folded." "Kelly, be a dear and polish my shoes." I wasn't a wife anymore. I was their maid, their background music, their housekeeper and personal assistant. And they were spending like the inheritance had already arrived. New clothes, designer bags, takeout every night. Jack booked them both facials at some upscale spa. His mother gushed about an investment opportunity she found online. I watched our joint account bleed out. Fast. I told Jack we needed to slow down, that the money hadn't come in yet, that we were using up my savings. He just laughed. "Babe, relax. We're rich now. 3 million, remember? This is just a little taste of the good life." But I wasn't laughing. My stomach was in knots every time I checked our account. Everything I had worked for, all the money I'd saved, over the years was vanishing. And he didn't care. Then one morning, I woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to Hawaii. Don't wait up." Just like that. They'd taken a trip. Without telling me. Without inviting me. Just packed their things, emptied out what was left in the account, and flew off to paradise like they were some kind of royalty. And that was the last straw. While they were off sipping cocktails and taking selfies, I made a quiet decision. I took a few days off work. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and made arrangements. I called a locksmith, changed every lock on the doors, moved my name to the top of every utility and bank account, transferred what little money was left into a new, private account, and then I waited. About a week later, there was a loud knock at the door. I glanced at the intercom monitor. There they were, Jack and his mother, still in their vacation clothes, standing in front of my building like they owned the place. He was pounding on the door. She was fanning herself, clearly annoyed. I pressed the speaker button. "What do you want?" Jack's voice was sharp. "Why won't the door open? What's going on?" I took a breath. I changed the locks. There was a pause. "What? Why?" I kept my voice calm. "Let's talk at the cafe around the corner. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. They were still yelling as I grabbed my bag and walked out the door. By the time I arrived, they were already seated, Jack red-faced, his mother whispering furiously. I sat down, placed a folder on the table, and slid it toward Jack. He opened it and blinked. Divorce papers. He looked up, stunned. "You're serious?" I nodded. "I've never been more serious." His mother sputtered. "Kelly, why? What's going on? This is ridiculous." I looked at them both, calm, steady, and I said, "I'm done being used. I'm done living like I don't matter. This, whatever this became, it's not love." They stared at me like they didn't recognize who I was anymore. But the truth is, they never really did. Jack slammed his hand on the table, his voice louder than it needed. "To be for a public place. Fine. If you want a divorce, give me half the inheritance then." His mother leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief, like she couldn't believe I dared to stand up to them. Jack was already pulling out his phone like he was ready to calculate exactly how much he thought he was owed. I didn't flinch. I looked at him, calm, clear. "The inheritance isn't marital property, Jack. It's legally mine. All of it." He froze, mid-scroll. "What are you talking about?" he said. That can't be right." His fingers scrambled across the screen, opening browser tabs, typing with increasing panic. I watched as his face changed, slowly, painfully, from confusion to disbelief to something closer to dread. His mother was already protesting. "That can't be true. You've been married all. This time, of course, you get something, right? That's how this works." I turned to her, my voice still quiet. "No, it doesn't. Money inherited from a parent is considered separate property. Not joint, not community, just mine." Jack looked up at me, his mouth dry. "So you're telling me I get nothing? After everything?" I nodded once. "That's right." He stared at me for a long time. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard him use, he said, "Kelly, please, don't do this. I don't have a job. I don't have any savings. How am I supposed to live?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who had laughed while spending my savings. Who had let his mother belittle me. Who had seen my grief as a payday. Who had treated me like a convenience. And I said, gently but firmly, "That's not my problem anymore." His mouth opened, then closed again. No words came out. His mother looked at me like she might scream, but I didn't stay long enough to find out. I stood up, tucked the divorce folder under my arm, and pushed my chair back slowly. "I'm done being used," I said. "I'm done being disrespected." And I meant it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a single insult. I just walked away. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I felt clear. I felt free. The divorce didn't drag out. Once the shock wore off and Jack realized he had no legal ground to stand on, things moved quickly. No fights, no drawn-out court drama, just signatures, paperwork, and silence. I sold the condo we used to live in, the one my father gave me, the place I once thought would be the start of something beautiful. It was hard letting it go, but I didn't want to carry those memories into the next part of my life. Too many nights spent feeling invisible inside those walls. Too many mornings waking up already exhausted. Instead, I moved into my father's old apartment. It wasn't as modern. The layout was a little dated, but it felt warm, familiar, safe, like my father was still there somehow. I painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, lit the same candles my mom used to love. For the first time in years, I made a home for myself. Not for a marriage, not for appearances, just for me. Jack and his mother ended up in a small rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, nothing comfortable. Word got around that they'd burned through what little money was left after the divorce. The Hawaii trip, the luxury shopping, the unpaid credit card bills. They were drowning in debt. Jack found a job bussing tables at a diner. His mother picked up part-time shifts at a salon, folding towels and sweeping floors. I heard they barely spoke to each other anymore, but I didn't feel satisfaction. Just distance. Like they belonged to a different chapter of a book I'd already closed. My life now? It's quieter, simpler, but every breath feels easier. I go to work. I cook for myself. I take walks in the evening and listen to music I love. Sometimes I catch myself smiling for no reason, just because I can. There's no one criticizing my every move. No one draining me. No one making me feel like I'm never enough. And in the silence of this new life, I often think of my father. He's still with me. In the way I carry myself, in the values I hold, in the calmness I've found again. Every decision I make now, it's for me. For the girl he raised. For the woman who finally remembered her worth. I didn't just escape a bad marriage. I reclaimed my dignity. And I hope, truly hope, that anyone out there feeling stuck, feeling small, feeling forgotten, remembers that it's never too late. You can start again. You can choose peace. If you've ever walked away from something toxic and found peace, share your story in the comments. Someone reading it might need the strength today. I know I would have. If this story moved you in any way, if it made you think, feel, or remember your own strength, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts, and maybe even help someone take their first step toward peace.